Hey, welcome to MyFi. Glad you're here. It's a great episode today. You got Todd Kerns on the show. I'm going to talk about him a little bit later. But wherever you're at, hit subscribe. Hit the little plus sign if you're on Apple Podcast. If you're on YouTube, just hit subscribe. Wherever you're listening, just subscribe however they want you to. You know how it works. And then follow us on social at MyFi Podcast everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the things. We love having conversations throughout the week about stuff that we've talked about on the show. So we'd love for you to be a part of those conversations. Just follow us on social and jump in and comment and, contribute a little bit. It's super fun. And I'm glad you're here because I'm stoked about the episode. And it was a great time hanging out with Todd. Can't wait for you to hear it. But yeah. Let's do it. Well, all right. We're in. We're here. We're here for the show. Todd Kerns on the episode today. Super excited about this one. Todd's a great inspiration to me. He's mostly known, at least in my eyes, from being a part of Slash's band, Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. He's an incredibly talented dude. I'm going to talk a bunch about stuff that Todd's done and things he has going on. But having Todd on the show got me thinking about really talented people who play with big artists, and maybe you don't know that person, like kind of like a side person or a music director that plays with artists that you know, but you may not know that side person or that music director or that player, who's in the band. And I got to thinking about people like that who I've followed, people that I admire, and made a little list just to draw attention to some people who I think deserve it. I think that's an interesting thing because there's even been people who, were side people or music directors who became artists themselves. I remember I saw a great documentary years ago called Hired Guns. And it talked about that world of like side musicians and people who play for artists, maybe that you've never known. There was another one about background vocalists. I think it was called 20 Feet from Stardom. That was really, really great. And so check those docs out if that sort of thing interests you. It certainly interests me, and I got to thinking about people like that who are just incredibly talented and awesome, who may not get the recognition, the same recognition, obviously, that the artist that they served and played for has gotten. But the first person that came to mind was James Burton. James Burton's from the area of North Louisiana that I'm from. And I had the honor of meeting James, and he played on a record that I worked on 20 plus years ago, and saw him and his wife a lot around town and events and everything. And he was just genuinely humble, genuinely talented, just amazing person. And he was a pioneer in the guitar world, with techniques and equipment and all sorts of stuff. But he played with Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Ricky Nelson, Elvis Costello. I mean, just tons and tons of incredible albums and recordings that he's been on, that you may not even know is James Burton. And he's such a great and talented guy. And so those when you listen to those records, if you listen to Elvis or Ricky Nelson, Roy Orbison, whatever, James is likely or could be playing guitar on it. So look, check it out. See, he's an amazing guy, and really humble, really kind as well, and obviously super talented. Another guy I thought about was Chuck Leavell. Chuck Leavell has played piano and kind of been the music director for the Rolling Stones for years and years. Super talented guy. Never had the honor of meeting Chuck Leavell, but I would love to. He's also played with Eric Clapton and George Harrison and even John Mayer. And I also think about people like Adam Blackstone. Now, Adam Blackstone just released a record, actually, and it's amazing. Adam Blackstone is like the music director's music director. If you don't know what a music director does, a solo artist will have a band backing them, obviously, and the music director is the person that kind of runs that band. And make sure they have what they need. They may even hire that band, but their job is to make that band play like a band. And it may not even be the people who played on the record. Sometimes these people had never played together before in their lives, but it's the music director's job to make sure the vibe's right and the band's doing the right thing and all that sort of stuff. And Adam Blackstone to me is like the music director's music director. Super super talented, multi-instrumentalist. The dude plays everything. He has been the music director or played with Dr. Dre, Justin Timberlake, The Roots, the Jonas Brothers, Maroon 5, Jay-Z. I mean, you name it. This guy is around. And if you're just a fan of the artist, that's awesome. But you may not know some of these people who are behind these artists are just amazing people and super, super talented. Another that comes to mind is Nita Strauss. Nita Strauss is a guitarist. She'd been with Alice Cooper for a long time. She'd done some solo stuff. She had a solo record called Control Chaos that came out. And most recently, she's been out on this Demi Lovato tour, the current Demi Lovato album. But Nita is just a player, an incredible guitar player. And sometimes you just don't know. There are incredibly talented people behind the artists that you love as well. And Todd Kerns is one of those people, especially in Slash's band. He's also a member of Bruce Kulick's band. He helps front that band and plays guitar. Bruce Kulick being the guitarist from Kiss in the 1980s, which Todd and I talk a good bit about in the episode. But it got me thinking, when I was thinking about record of the week too, thinking about all these side people and musicians, music directors that I love that play for artists that we all love and adore. And I pulled a record of the week. Now, it's a little off topic, but I'm thinking about Guns N' Roses, obviously with Todd playing with Slash and all that. And I always loved Izzy Stradlin, the other guitarist for Guns N' Roses. And I'm assuming you know who Guns N' Roses is because you probably have a t-shirt from Target. Guns N' Roses, even if you don't know who they are. And listen, I'm not one of those guys who needs you to name 3 songs. I'm just glad you have a Guns t-shirt or a Nirvana t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate that. You should probably go listen to the music because it's really good music. But I'm glad you got the shirt. But I'm assuming that everybody in the world knows who Guns N' Roses is. You probably know who Slash is. He's the guitarist from Guns N' Roses with the top hat. But they had another guitarist, original guitarist, Izzy Stradlin, who I was also and still am a big Izzy Stradlin fan. My record of the week is actually Izzy Stradlin's solo project. It came out right around the time he left the band, just after he left the band. And it's called Izzy Stradlin and the Juju Hounds. If you're watching on video, I got a copy of it on vinyl. It's not an original copy, so if you know vinyl, those things are expensive. This is a repress, but Izzy Stradlin, the Juju Hounds, it's self-titled. It's a great, great rock and roll record. And I also wanted to just show, even though Izzy Stradlin, the Juju Hounds is my official record of the week, I also wanted to show a second one. Todd has a band called Minefield that he fronts as well, and they did this record, and it's fantastic. I picked a copy of it up in Nashville when I met Todd, and it's just a killer album. So you should go listen to the Minefield record too. Todd's on the show today, obviously bass player for Slash and featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. He also plays guitar and fronts in Bruce Kulick's band. He's super tall, just a super tall Canadian dude, super nice, incredibly talented. He's got signature guitars with Prestige. He has his own blend of coffee, all sorts of stuff that Todd has going on. He's in a band called Toque that has a new single coming out in a couple of weeks, along with a video, I think a week or two after that. Just has a lot going on. He lives in Vegas, plays a lot of shows there. That's where he is for our interview today. And you should just check him out at Todd Kerns on Instagram and social, and at Todd Dammit Kerns on Twitter. And his website is toddkerns.com. The website's probably the best place to hit because he has so much going on and so many projects and so much stuff that you should just go check out his website, toddkerns with a K.com. And man, I had a great conversation. I have a lot of admiration for Todd. He's super kind and just incredibly talented, obviously, but just approachable and answers all of my questions. And we talked a lot when we met in Nashville, and he and Brent Fitz, who also plays in Slash's band but has been Todd's friend for a long time, they did a little meet and greet thing where they played ukuleles and they covered Kiss stuff and did some of their own stuff, and it was just really fun, man. We had a blast. We drank some of his coffee and hung out and talked about music. It was super fun. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this super awesome conversation I had with my friend Todd Kerns. What's up, Todd Kerns? How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Where are you, man?
I am in Las Vegas, Nevada.
That's home?
The sun is shining. It is home. I've been living here 16 years or something like that. It's probably around 17. 2006 was the official sort of relocation of sorts, even though it wasn't really a relocation at all. I just, some stuff came up down here and I sort of found myself here and I was bouncing back and forth. I'm from Canada originally. So I was bouncing back and forth from Vancouver and then eventually just sort of, this became kind of home base.
Yeah. Nice, man. So you're from Canada, grew up there. Did you stay there into your adult years? I know you said you moved to Vegas 16 years ago, but were you already living in the States?
No, I was living in Vancouver in Canada up until that point. So, I had a whole career in Canada that sort of, kept me very, very busy up there. I still had a career in Canada when I came down here, but we
and you
were
still
touring
do.
down. Yeah, exactly. I was touring down in the States a lot. Like my band back in the 90s had management out of New York. Our label was out of New York. So we spent a lot of time in the US, but never relocated. It just didn't make a lot of sense. I had a family and children and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't until later on that I sort of, the work started to overtake the necessity to be in Canada. So I just sort of found myself here. Plus, once I bought a house in 2010, it was a recession, so everything was super affordable. So it just made sense, and then now I'm sort of here. Yeah.
Nice, man. Were anybody in your family musical when you were growing up? Were your parents musical or?
Yeah, they were both musical. My mom played piano. My dad played guitar. None of them took it very seriously. I think it was a lot more of a, when I picked up the guitar, it was more of like, well, that'll be great for you to play for the family at Christmas time or whatever, that kind of thing. And, unfortunately for them, it became pretty clear pretty quickly to me that this was sort of not a hobby in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always tell this story because my dad played guitar, but he was sort of more like have a few drinks and campfire song kind of love Johnny Cash and, stuff like that. And then he got me an Epiphone. It was a 70s Epi, they called it. I think it was probably the more affordable Epiphone. I don't even remember, but I don't have that guitar anymore. I really wish I did. Yeah. And then just in his strange sort of vision thought, well, you have a guitar, we should get you a bass. Just a strange, I didn't even have an electric guitar. I just had an acoustic guitar. And we went down to the store and there was an EB3, a Gibson EB3 on the wall, which I still have.
Nice.
And I just, then the next day at high school, it's like, this guy has a Gibson. And back then, no one wanted to play bass guitar. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody was a drummer or a guitar player, or in some instances, a singer, which was usually just some sort of, some person with charisma who decided they were going to stand out front. But I found like all the guys that wanted to play wanted to drum solo or guitar solo, and the bass player was always sort of this afterthought. So I ended up playing with guys who were like 5 years older than me, way more advanced than I was. I could, barely get around in the damn thing. But then you play catch up real soon. And then you play who's the least worst singer in the band. And I won that one a little bit here and there. So it sort of, once that happened, once I was sort of playing with some guys and there was an organized, it had a name and we could play the high school dance or the box social or whatever, kind of thing they would do. Then we sort of, and those guys were all out of high school and ready to go. Like, let's go. We got a circuit and an agent who wants to book us. And my parents were very sort of, just finish high school, then you can go off and do this for a couple of years and then get out of your system and then get a real job. I'm still doing this all these years later. I still haven't gotten it out of my system, I guess.
Still waiting on that real job.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Do you remember what the first music was that you heard when you were a kid that just was like, oh man, that's cool. Like something that inspired you?
I do remember the first rock and roll song. I was a child, and I remember hearing "Jumpin' Jack Flash" by the Rolling Stones. I even have, I even have. I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "I was born in a crossfire hurricane" under here.
Yeah.
Just because I just remember hearing that, danning, ding, danning, ding, danning, danning, ding, danning, ding, danning, and just sort of like, lit a fire under me. I was like, "What is this?" And in retrospect, it sounded like, I don't know. There's something about the Rolling Stones to me that has always had sort of a dangerous quality to it, whether it was, I think that's just the nature of that group. I think that just always had that.
Totally.
And they're not my number one band in a lot of ways, I would say, but they definitely, that song, for whatever reason, long before I could connect to anything else, even though my parents were both liked music, but they weren't obsessed. They weren't the kind of people who were like, this is John Lennon and this is Paul McCartney. Like, they were just kind of like, but once I kind of got a little older, and when I say a little older, I was probably like 8 or 9 or something like that, finding my mom's Beatles records, and she would, oh yeah, Paul McCartney, he was the cute one. She went through her whole experience as the Beatles fan. And I was like obsessed, because the Beatles were like a 4-headed monster that in a lot of ways, I think, spoke to the sort of inner fantasy as a child that a rock band, they looked all the same to me, the same haircut, the same suit, with a variation on the look as well. But, my dad was into Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and outlaw country, which at the time was just country. And my mom was, my mom also was, the kind of mom who had Abba playing in the car or, stuff like that. So pop music that was very popular at the time. And all that stuff seeps into you. It just becomes part of your DNA in a way, and I literally feel like even the most shameful pop music, I am very unembarrassed to be like, oh dude, this song, like Andy Gibb or one of those kind of songs will come on and go, oh, this is an amazing song. And people look at me like, well, how do you know this? I'm like, dude, it just a good song is a good song is a good song. It's just how I've always sort of been wired.
Yeah. My kids, I think I naturally will surf Apple Music every Friday, just checking out new bands and artists or new records or whatever. Cool. But my kids, they'll catch stuff that I miss, and just this past week, my daughter was like, hey, there's a Charlie Puth album that came out. And I was like, oh, really? Throw it on. Wow. She throws it on. I'm like, wow, this is incredibly well written and produced. I don't know that I listen to a ton of his stuff. You see it on TikTok or social or whatever, but
sure. Yeah.
Even that, I'm kind of the same way. I'm just like, man, there's so much good stuff still in the pop world, that's hitting too. But it's funny.
From a songwriting standpoint, I think we can all respect a well-written song. That's, Max Martin and those guys have, the proof's in the pudding. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But, I definitely gravitated more towards loud, ugly rock and roll. And that was just sort of natural as a young guy to be, Cheap Trick and Kiss and all that kind of stuff was sort of more my jam. Yeah, I'm talking about because I was a kid in the mid to late 70s. I'm talking about like a child, we were really obsessed with Kiss and all that kind of stuff. And still kind of are, actually.
Totally, man.
And no shame here. And it just sort of, it sort of grew from there. We went into a whole punk rock phase. And I think that's sort of when we started getting into playing music, it became a lot more like, because once you get kind of away from the idea of, I don't know, like you have to be able to play like David Gilmour, and I could play like Johnny Ramone. I could do that.
Yeah,
get
totally.
In the garage and make a bunch of racket together. So that sort of opened that door, in a lot of ways, where it became, you became a little bit more fearless about, if you find the right guys that want to just kind of, play together, then you don't have to worry about because I would jam with older guys who would be like, this is the Doobie Brothers, sir. You have to kind of, And I'd be like, give me a break,
Yeah.
And, these are all guys that, just played in their basement. They never actually took it on stage anyway, but I was like, okay, dude. But, and then once I started playing in a band, playing shows, it became a lot more serious. We became a lot more invested in, I don't think anybody thought of it as a career, but it was sort of like we could do this and we can actually travel and it wasn't about money because there was no money. It was like, we're going to get in a van. It may not make it to that town and it's going to be freezing cold and we really don't have anywhere to stay, but we're going to go there because they want us to play. And you're like, okay, and that's what we did.
Yeah, totally, man. Do you remember when you were young, what the first show was you saw, first concert?
Yeah, the first real concert I saw was the most Canadian experience ever because it was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and it was Loverboy.
Nice.
With a very young new upstart named Bryan Adams opening.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he was, of course he went on to eclipse everybody, but at the time he was the young sort of full of piss and vinegar. I was just a kid, but yeah, he definitely left an impression on me. And Loverboy was sort of Loverboy, red leather and the headbands and all that stuff. So it was very, very Canadian, but a very, very big deal. And those guys are now, the Loverboy guys are kind of friends of ours. So, we see them around. It's always kind of a trip. And Brian's always been cool. I don't know him like a friend, but he's always been very cool.
That's awesome, man. It's crazy when you grow up and you start to meet people and even, to a certain degree, befriend people that you've admired and watched.
Absolutely.
Like when we met in Nashville, I was like, dang, that's Todd Kerns. I remember watching the, oh my gosh, just escaped my, was it The World on Fire that y'all did the documentary with Slash and the Conspirators, Myles Kennedy? I watched that whole like behind the scenes making of the record thing. So I fanboyed a little bit when I met you and Brent up there a little bit, just because I remember listening to that and that record being recorded live and all that for a musician. Watching that documentary going, man, this is rock and roll happening right in front of my face. And that was a little different in that time. Not a lot of people were making fully live stuff. I know there was probably some dubs on it, but that record was just amazing. So I can't imagine what it was like for you. Yeah, with the Canadian acts and stuff now, or the people that you looked up to that you've gotten to hang out and befriend.
It is surreal, I mean, especially within the Slash world. It's become, very early on, it's like Lemmy's getting up to jam with us. What? Like Lemmy was a big deal for me, and Alice Cooper's going to get up and jam. Like, what? And then you get to know these guys on a sort of, they weren't friends per se, but at least I respected them too much to call them like my pals, but
sure, they
know who you are and you know who they are, and that's kind of enough. You know what I mean? So, it's I mean. It's such a surreal thing, but I think that's the interesting thing about music is it's sort of, it's like we're all musicians trying to make a go of it. And, and everybody's, at least my mindset has always been kind of like, cheering on my fellow musicians. If they can make a career out of this, it's like, then in my mind, they're a success. Whether you're playing, cover songs in a local showroom in a casino, I'm like, dude, you've made it. You know what I mean? Like you're not digging ditches during the day, you're actually like doing it, and you've made it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I see you. I watched you guys at Creatures Fest cover Revenge, cover to cover, and it was just everybody. Obviously, Bruce is amazing, but you and Zach and Brent, and I mean, just it was so great. And so I watch you do all these big shows like that, and then doing the Slash stuff, and the even the Toque stuff, your band. But then I also see you post about all the shows that you do in clubs around Vegas and all those sorts of things, and it just seems like there's a apparent love for music for you that's always been around.
Oh yeah. I mean, even now it's like I do this show here in Vegas when I'm home, Raiding the Rock Vault, and it's one of those interesting things to me because it's like, Blas Elias from Slaughter, who I saw in 91, Slaughter and, Cinderella in a hockey arena, it's like, and then Oni Logan from Lynch Mob and, all these kind of guys. And it's like really, to me, it's like, getting up and just playing music is the true reward of all of this. You know what I mean? Like, as my friend puts it, it's kind of like, we do this for free. It's all the other stuff you got to pay us for, the travel and the, all the hassles at the airport and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's, that's what, but the actual getting up on stage and playing music. So the beauty of being in Las Vegas so you're telling me I can jump in my car for 15 minutes and then go play with all my friends and then come home and sleep in my bed. It's like, what's the catch? You know what I mean? So getting to do that is a blast. And, so I just, I honestly just love playing. I like music. I've always loved music since the day Jumpin' Jack Flash came on the radio or wherever it was. Yeah. And it's sort of like, if my 15-year-old self could have heard, this is my life, because there's a funny thing about, kind of coming to grips with the fact that, that there's no ceiling to this experience. You know what I mean? Like there's sort of like, no matter what you do, there's always I've never played on Saturday Night Live, you know, like you're always kind of like, there's always sort of like something in mind that if it never happens, it never happens, but it's always sort of there. Like this sort of like, wouldn't that be cool? Or, you know, any number of experiences, Grammys, all that kind of stuff you think. But at the same time, because I grew up with punk rock, it sort of was, that kind of stuff just didn't matter in a way. Like it's sort of like, who cares? You know, people will always complain to me, oh, I watched the whatever music awards last night. There wasn't one rock and roll band. And I go, dude, when I was a kid, Iggy Pop was never on the Grammys, you know, the Ramones or the New York Dolls were never, you know what I'm saying? Like all the bands that I loved were never there. So who cares? You know, it's great that the Foo Fighters show up and have guitars and represent some rock and roll thing. But in my estimation, it was always kind of like, that's not a true sign of success to me. You know what I mean? Playing this music and being able to kind of like have a life for yourself. That's what I feel grateful every day that this is what I do. And that it seems to be what I continue to do until someone comes along and taps you and goes, thank you for your time.
Well, that humility comes across. I was standing backstage the night that you guys did the Revenge thing, and Steve Brown from Trickster and Tokyo Motorfest, we were standing backstage, and you walked right off the backstage and walked right to Steve and I and went, guys, how did it sound? And I was like, what do you mean, how did it sound? It was amazing, dude. It was crazy.
Well, it is one of those things, you know, no matter how it's going on stage, you're kind of like, you know, because I'm having a blast, regardless of, you know, I'm not the kind of person that gets I don't get hung up on the thing of like, what's the mix sound like? It's like, I'm having a blast. I get to play with my friends. We get to play that music, you know, that stuff that I grew up on. And, you know, Zach and I are very close friends, and Brent and I have known each other for a million years, like brothers. And and the first time I ever saw Kiss, Bruce was the guitar player, you know what I mean? So,
wow.
So, you know, that kind of stuff. But then you walk off and you go, you know, you look at professionals like yourselves and go like, that was cool, right? Like everything was okay. Cause you know, you just never know. Yeah.
Well, Revenge is my favorite Kiss record, and that's not a popular thing to say for some reason, but I love that.
It seems like to me that Revenge is a very all around respected. Everybody goes, well, yeah, I mean, Revenge, yeah, it's like,
it is. But if you don't say Destroyer or Rock and Roll Over,
of course, yeah, I see what you mean. Like, really? you're actually like you're treading into the weeds of the non-makeup Kiss, yeah. But I have a ton of friends, man. Chris Jericho, Eddie Trunk, all those guys are non-makeup Kiss guys. As much as Eddie is a makeup guy too, but there's a great deal of love and respect for that era. And I'm with you in that I loved the makeup Kiss, but I was just telling the story the other day because I was saying how like, you know, like somebody older was saying, yeah, and then they made, you know, Dynasty or whatever, and they totally lost me. And I go, dude, I was like 9 or something when Dynasty came out. It was a new Kiss record. It was the law that we all loved it. It was like, we weren't smart enough to, or like knowledgeable enough to discern like, this is disco, this is Rock and Roll Over or Love Gun. It was just sort of like, it was a new Kiss. It was massive. The record Dynasty, I will argue to this day, is an amazing record. And by the time we were sort of like really into that mode of like really following music and loving music, the non-makeup Kiss was as relevant as, you know, Motley Crue or whatever other music you were into at the time. Yeah. So to me, it was, I was a fan. I was just saying the other day how the only record I didn't buy the day it came out, or the first one that I didn't kind of like line up to buy or go in the day it came out, was Hot in the Shade. Like I'd kind of like, oh, right, I got to go pick that one up. And that was just sort of like, I was already on the road by that point, like as a kid, but you know, I was a fan. I still am. You know, I follow the band and I love what they do. It changes as you get older and you become an adult and you start to know these guys on a first name basis. Well, I mean, or like on a personal basis to some degree that you respect them and love them. And as fans, we can have, it's like being a Star Wars fan where you're like, that movie's terrible, you know, but you still love the genre, you know.
It's still Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And we get real passionate about it. And the same with Kiss. You can have records that are like, yeah, it's kind of a miss for me, dog. You know, you get full Randy Jackson on it. But at the same time, it's nothing but love and respect for the group and what they do.
Totally.
You know, it's what That's what true. I think that's a true sign of a fan, is that you are going to be there regardless of whichever missteps come along.
You said something a minute ago about Bloss from Slaughter. That was the first band I ever saw live.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What a good band to see live. Great bunch of guys, too.
My dad took me to see Poison and Slaughter on the Flesh and Blood tour in 1990.
Wow.
And so Slaughter opened. Always in my mind, I'm thinking Poison's the first band I ever saw because it was a Poison show. But Slaughter opened. So technically, and literally, Slaughter was the first live band I ever saw in my life. So when you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, that dude knows the drummer from Slaughter. The 11-year-old. I'm
playing with him in about 5 hours from now. Yeah, he's an amazing guy.
Nice. Well, tell him thanks, because I had just gotten my first electric guitar in December of '89, and then I saw them in March of '90, I think it was, because it was around my birthday, and that was it. It was over. I'm playing music.
That's amazing.
That's
amazing.
So it was great. You remember what the first record was you bought with your own money?
Jeez, that's such a confusing one. I remember getting like a Bay City Rollers record, but I think that was a Christmas. I think it was a Christmas gift or a birthday gift. But again, I was as a child, so to us, they were a rock band. They had a TV show in the mornings and all that kind of stuff, and they had accents and shit. We were like, they were kind of there's still a few of us who have this sort of like weird kind of like connection to that band. Like, wasn't that great? It kind of was like 5 minutes where they just kind of went away or whatever. But I honestly don't remember, because I remember buying Kiss Alive. I want to say probably with our own money, my brother and I combining our allowance and going down to it was not even a record shop, because we lived in a small town. So it would have been like just a store, like a Walmart kind of store, but back in the 70s. So, and Kiss was overwhelming by that point, because there was already a bunch of records out. I think we were talking about like 77 maybe by this point. 76. And so you're like, what do we get? And I remember we picked up, the first one we picked up was Kiss Alive. The second one we picked up was Gene Simmons' solo album.
Oh, wow.
which is such a weird way to start, but it came fast and furious by that point. Like every weekend we were going out and buying Kiss records until there were no more Kiss records to buy. And that's why I distinctly remember Dynasty coming out. That's when it came out in real time for us. Sort of like, this is the new Kiss record. So it kind of like everything up to that point had already kind of been released. But Kiss Alive was massive impact. It had a massive impact on us because it's a live record. The fact that you're getting the full experience of the crowd and Paul Stanley's raps and all that, and the drum solos and guitar solos and all that kind of stuff. The bass solo before 100,000 Years. It just was the full experience of what that was. So I want to think it feels like the cool thing to say that Kiss Alive 1 was the first that we actually bought with our own money. But I think that's probably true. I remember after that, then all of a sudden it's Fast and Furious with the Van Halen and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So you into high school, you start playing live, start traveling a little bit. Somehow one gig parlays itself into another, and you end up in the room with Slash, who is like a hero to so many people, so many guitar players, at least in my generation for sure. Mm-hmm. Because I literally, the first cassette I bought, I was a cassette that I bought purely with my own money, because my brother and I had put our money together and bought some stuff. I bought a Bobby Brown cassette. And then the next weekend I bought Hysteria and Appetite for Destruction on the same day.
Wow.
And so it was like 87-ish, all that stuff had come out. And I was just like, I never heard anything like this before in my life. And I don't know if you were, a Guns fan or whatever, but talk a little bit about how, your journey kind of parlayed itself into being on stage and writing and working with one of the best guitar players of history.
I have to admit that Appetite had a massive impact on me. I think that, like anybody, I'd been a big music fan, and, growing up in a small town was great because you just liked what you liked. There wasn't really sort of like, these are the goth kids and these are the punk rock kids and these are the metal kids and these are the new wave, it's like, and the prog rock guys. It was just kind of like a bunch of people who like music, so you could sit there and go, let's listen to this Rush record, and now let's listen to this Sex Pistols record, and now let's listen, and there were definitely like people would be like, this is terrible, or in whichever one of those bands that they didn't like. But I always found like I really got a lot out of almost all of those groups and really enjoyed them.
Yeah.
But, leaning into the 80s that you're talking about, where it became sort of, people always talk about Nevermind being such a gigantic shift. And it was, you know what I mean? But I always believe that Appetite was an initial shift in.
I agree.
The bands were real slick looking and real, clean looking and real kind of like polished, and everything sounded really polished. And then you press play on that cassette, because I had it on cassette first too. Because by that point, I had a boom box and I was traveling.
Yeah.
I always on the go, and I bought that, and it was like, it sort of rendered all that previous music a little bit invisible, like very quickly, like, oh damn, these guys are the real deal. There was some sort of danger there that I don't think a lot of bands had sort of tapped into. And I think that they, because the whole story of them being these junkies on the streets of Hollywood and all that, and you're kind of like, that's what it sounds like, from Welcome to the Jungle into It's So Easy. You're just like that 1-2 punch. You're like, damn, these guys. I mean, they were cussing on the record too, so you were like, I hadn't heard a whole lot of actual. I heard cussing live, like Dee Snider or something like that, but not on the actual song so much, and we were like, damn, and it just felt dangerous. It felt real. And I think that, that had a massive impact. So that to the point that every single song, so that when like years later, when I start playing with Slash, I did no research. I just showed up and I was like, what song are we playing? Because Appetite is just sort of like in me, you know what I mean? Yeah. Use Your Illusions is a lot more vast and a lot more, would be more challenging to say, well, okay, let's play Coma or something like that. Yeah. But, in 1991, my band, The Age of Electric from Canada, we went down to LA and we were doing the hustle, we're going to get signed. We're going to play the clubs and all that kind of stuff. And we were playing the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy. So we were doing the whole thing, like standing out on the street. This is in 91. Everybody talks about like 1990, the Strip was over. It wasn't. It was still on fire. Like you could hang out on the Sunset Strip and never go in a club and have a good time. It was the weirdest thing. It was just people on the street the whole time. And then we would be handing out flyers, and then we'd end up at the Rainbow every night, just kind of like, that's what you did. And it was like Metal Edge magazine in there every night, because it was like, dudes from every single band you could imagine wandering around, or at that booth or that booth. And Slash we were at the back booth, the November Rain booth. If you watch November Rain, there's a shot where they're all
I know exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. At the time, I didn't really know that, because Appetite or Use Your Illusion wasn't out yet. It was, but we were sitting there, and Slash was sitting in the corner booth where he always sat. There's now a picture of himself in that corner. And Slash got up and he goes, "Hey, who are you guys?" And just sits with us in 1990. Like, so 9 years before I ever played with him. Do you know what I mean? Like, sort of like just sat with us and kind of like hung out with us. Oh, we're from Canada. Oh, wow. And we just sort of, you could smoke in there back then. So there was a lot of smoking and having some drinks. And he was like the mayor of the Rainbow. He's just kind of like, hey, and he was in the full black leather, or he looked like Slash, you know what I mean? And so we would see those guys in Duff and all that at the Rainbow a bunch, and then we kind of like did our thing and went back to Canada and had a whole other chapter to our career. And then a million years later, when Brent Fitz, our drummer, got the gig with Slash, he just sort of said, hey, do you want to come down and jam? It was sort of, it wasn't really a big audition type conversation. It was, do you want to come jam? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I came and jammed, and that was that. The story is that I brought my father. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but my father was in town. My father was in Vegas with me. I was buying a house. So it was nice to have a grown-up present for that process. And so he came down, and we were like, sitting at a Chili's after, and I was just eating, and I get a phone call from Brent Fitz, and I pick up the phone, and he goes, and he says, can you be in North Hollywood tomorrow to jam with Slash and the guys. And I look across the table and I go to my dad, do you want to go to LA tomorrow? He goes, I've never been to LA. I go, well, that's reason enough to go to LA. Yeah. So we just drove there the next day and in the morning and played with the guys. And then they wouldn't let me leave. That was, I was a very busy working musician in Las Vegas. I had a whole bunch of stuff going on here and I had to be like, oh, damn, I've got a gig on the weekend. I got to go back. So they're like, well, we'll let you go back and kill that last weekend, but then you got to come back because we're doing Jay Leno and all this kind of stuff. So
wow.
So it was on pretty fast, and then went on for 18 months, that thing. Like it just went on. Like I thought it was going to be like, I didn't know what it was going to be, but I kind of assumed it would be like 3 months of flyouts on the weekends to support the record and then like high five, good game and never see each other again. But 12 years ago, that was 12 years ago.
Yeah, man. The Record Store Day release that came out this past Record Store Day, there was a live release that sounds amazing. And so you guys just have so much chemistry, I think, as a band. I can't imagine now after so many records and you and Brent and Myles Kennedy and, that's Slash's band now. So as a fan, somebody who listens, the chemistry that you guys have, I can't imagine something being different, and, yeah, man, that's crazy. What do you have, what you got going on now? I know, Toque's got a single coming up.
It's a funny traffic jam of stuff now because Toque, the funny thing is we spent the whole summer just slamming it with gigs that were booked in 2020 that of course got canceled. And then 2021, we couldn't do them. And so 2022, it just kind of like all came crashing down on us to just be flying up to Canada every weekend doing gigs. So we shot a bunch of live footage as we always do. And then we decided, well, let's try and compile it all down to a video. So we are going to put that out early November, and I
saw a teaser for that. It looks fun.
Yeah, it's really, and honestly, the funniest thing about it is we do it ourselves. I mean, Corey and Shane are both really good with the cameras and the drones and all kinds of stuff, and I'm always kind of like, I always say, look, what I bring to the table is the ability to get up here, sing songs, talk to the audience, keep the audience entertained. I don't know how to do all that nonsense. I'm not really interested. And then I have another project, Heroes and Monsters, that myself and Will Hunt from Evanescence and a lot of this stuff came up during COVID when it was, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember as early as like late 21, early 22, when people were saying, oh, we're never touring again. This is it. This is the way it's going to be. Like there was a lot of like very dark talk. And I was sort of like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just keep working on recording projects. So guys like Will, and Steph Burns, this friend of ours, he's played with Alice Cooper, Huey Lewis and News and a bunch of bands like that, just started knocking ideas back and forth. And that sort of became a thing unto itself. So that kind of fun stuff really started to present itself during all that too. So we have a single coming out in late October. So it's
what's the name of that project again with Will?
Heroes and Monsters, it's called. Yeah.
Heroes and Monsters.
Yeah. So that will be announced, probably in the next few weeks. But it's such a fascinating time to be able to kind of like just, be able to make music, especially remotely like this. You know what I mean? Like, I know you do the same thing where it's kind of like, ultimately working with Slash is such a different experience because Slash has no interest in doing anything remotely. We get in a room together, we go to a studio together. He's not interested in like doing something in somebody's basement. We go to an actual recording studio and make records. And the last one, as SMKC4, was completely live. Like we played all together. I think there was some overdubbing with some harmony vocals and things like that. But largely, even Myles, probably 80% of the record he recorded right there in the room with us. So
wow,
that's completely unheard of by today's standards. But guys like Dave Cobb, the guy who produced the record, that's kind of how he does it. So I think that's sort of, when you look back at, I don't know, the first Led Zeppelin album or Black Sabbath or any of those records, those records that were early days, it takes a specific level of concentration and focus to kind of be like, this is the record. It's like, when you're playing, like you're kind of like trying to capture the drums so that you can, build upon that. But when you're playing, and I've always sort of been that guy where it's like when I'm playing with the drums with the intent of keeping the drums, my intent is always to try and play as well as I can and as tight as I can, just so that we can kind of, if we don't need to redo the bass, great, perfect, yeah. we're set. So that was just sort of like hyper focused for this, where it was kind of like, this is it, so, and with Dave, it's especially interesting because the amps are in the live room, there's stuff bleeding everywhere, the drums, Myles is in a booth, but the rest of us were all out there on the floor, and there's a lot of like chatter, no click track. So it's like really, really,
Gosh,
I don't know.
That's outstanding.
And I've done it in every possible way. Like when I look back at World on Fire or Living the Dream or even Apocalyptic Love, those records we did, there was definitely live aspects to it. And we definitely had click tracks to kind of control, because in some ways you want control for certain things. So I certainly don't think that one way is the way. I think that you kind of like can find magic in every possible way. And I think that this particular time, Slash is always leaning as live as possible. And I appreciate that about him. He's always sort of, he's done a million things in his life. And the challenge of like, let's just make this live. He hates having to kind of overdub his solos and like to the point where you've kind of like lost all the passion, but it's perfect, but is it feeling like anything? I don't know. So he likes to just kind of go in and just rip it out. And that's what he does,
Are you guys going to tour that record?
Well, we did about 9 weeks, which is which is a weird thing to say, but we all ended up with the same problem where all these things that we had agreed to in 2020 with Guns N' Roses and all that kind of stuff had to be dealt with in 2022. So we put out the record SMKC4 in March or April, I can't remember what it was, but we did the States. And then that was it, so we hope to reconvene at some point, but I'm not sure if that'll be reconvening for that record or reconvening for new music entirely. I don't know. At this point, it's because we're still in the weeds as far as the pandemic goes. I mean, it sort of has set things kind of back, in a weird way where we have to kind of get back into a rhythm of how this is going to work. There's a new Alter Bridge record on the horizon, and that sort of takes Myles away. And but it's all good. The way I look at it is like, everybody's busy, everybody's healthy and strong and back at it, and the world's sort of reopening, and I think we just roll with it. Yeah man. You if you had 3 desert island records, what would they be? What are the 3 records that Todd Kerns is? You gotta have them, man. You gotta be able to listen to them. That would be really tough, dude. I'll say Kiss Alive right now, just because it was there. It sort of acts as a greatest hits package of those first 3 records in a sense. Because I often argue that the first album might be my favorite Kiss album, and people go, "What are you talking about?" I go, "You can play Cold Gin, Strutter, Deuce, Black Diamond." I go down the 100,000 Years. All those songs could be in the set today, and we would love that record. Or we would love that show. But I mean, the recording of that first record is a bit neutered. That's why the live album always wins. But The Who was a massive impact on me. It's a weird thing for me as a kid. I think looking at the Beatles and Kiss kind of felt like, I don't know, looking at like comic books, like I'm gonna fly and I'm gonna
superheroes,
X-ray vision or something. It just didn't seem like anything attainable. But then punk rock started to become very sort of curious to me, and I saw The Kids Are All Right film, and it was the first time I looked at something and thought, this Townsend was this gangly dude with a prominent nose and wasn't your obvious sort of like poster boy kind of rock star, and the aggression and the smashing and all that stuff just really grabbed me, and I went down that rabbit hole for several years. So that would be tough too. And that I guess Who's Next? We'll put that on the list, even though that might be kind of, that's just me grabbing in the dark. After that, Jesus. I'll say Budokan. I'll just say Budokan. After this is done, I'll be like, dude, you forgot about this and that.
Yeah.
But Cheap Trick Live at Budokan was another example of, I mean, it's interesting to me that like Frampton Comes Alive, Kiss Alive, Budokan, like all these bands, all these live albums were sort of introducing an artist to you that was sort of like, that was their biggest records at that time, which is, that doesn't happen today, that a live album is important. You know what I mean? But
it's so interesting.
It must be just very much of that time, because Frampton Comes Alive was the biggest record for a long time, was the biggest selling record of all time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't familiar with any of those songs until the live album, you know. And I think Budokan is another example of recordings that become the quintessential versions of those songs, where they'd already recorded Surrender and I Want You to Want Me and all those songs.
Yeah.
But they were kind of neutered in the same way that the early Kiss records weren't quite perfection, that the live album sort of captured everything about them. And I think that Budokan does the same thing. Again, I'll go down the list and be like, Nevermind the Bullocks and a bunch of things like that that'll end up being on my list as well. The first Dolls album, a lot of those, I mean, there's a lot of, it would be a very weird hodgepodge of styles that I would be that I would be raving about if I had to have 10 records in my desert record collection. But if I only have 3, then I guess that's a good place to be.
Yeah. Well, man, I so appreciate the time, man. It was an honor to have you on the show. Y'all check out Todd Kerns online, at Todd Kerns on social, at Todd Dammit Kerns on Twitter, toddkerns.com. He's got signature guitars and basses from Prestige. He's got coffee that's amazing. I had some of in Nashville. Somehow I got some of it somewhere.
It was being served there. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because we did the thing. You and Brent did the great little show with the ukuleles. It was awesome. Yeah, y'all just check him out. Todd is an incredible, talented artist in and of himself. But obviously plays with some of the biggest names in the world. And so, man, I appreciate you being on the show, dude.
My pleasure. 100%. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. Take care, Todd.
Take care, brother.
Man, what a great hang with Todd. What a great dude. Talented, amazing, super nice. Has had an incredible career and has incredible stuff going on. Go check out his website. Go check out his coffee and his guitars and all that sort of stuff. Look for the new Toque single that comes out in a couple weeks. Make sure to follow Todd on social, at Todd Kerns, on Instagram and stuff. Gosh, that was an honor to interview him. I mentioned in the episode, but I remember watching the World on Fire / behind the scenes sort of thing when they were tracking the live rhythm tracks and stuff for that record, and just going, wow, this band is just rock and roll, and being so pumped about it and so inspired. And so it was a real honor to have Todd on the show. So thanks, Todd. And listen, follow MyFi. Keep up with what we got going on. We got some killer interviews coming up. At MyFi Podcast everywhere. At MyFi Podcast on TikTok, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the things. We're everywhere. Go check out the website, myfipodcast.com. You can sign up for a newsletter there. You can check out past episodes and artwork and stuff from those. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find it pretty easy on Apple Podcasts to subscribe. You just click the plus button there in the upper right corner, and then just hit the big subscribe button on YouTube. You know the deal. So thanks for hanging out with us. Tell a friend. You know what I'm saying? And come back to enjoy some more interviews with musicians and creative people and entrepreneurs and people that inspire us and people that we love. So come hang out with us again. And until then, have a good one.